welcome back to another episode of Inspiration Talks. I'm very excited about today's episode. I have a very special guest all the way from UK. Deirdre Morrison is with me. She is the founder of NeuroDevelopment Institute, and also she has her own podcast, and the name of the podcast is the Incubator Podcast. So before any delay, let's welcome Deirdre. Hi Deirdre, how are you doing today?
Hello, Liba. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome, Deirdre, and thank you so much for being part of Inspiration Talks. So I would like to start our today's conversation with how was your early life? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in County Limerick in Ireland, and where I grew up, it was very much a farming area. So there was a lot of fields and cows and countryside all around me. So the sort of childhood that I had was filled with animals, lots and lots of animals of different kinds, cattle and goats and chickens and ponies and donkeys and dogs and cats, and also reading. I was a child who absolutely loved reading. In fact, I used to get given out to because I would spend so much time reading if I could.
Okay, so as you are right now a neurotransformation coach, so then how did you become a neurotransformation coach?
That is a very good question, and it's it's a journey that had a lot of twists and turns in it. Because when I left school, I went to university to study art and design, and after that, I had a career in PR and communications. And after that, I moved into running my own businesses, which were typically very creative businesses, including photography and publishing and so on. And then eventually I became very interested, because I had children of my own, I became very interested in the learning process, particularly when my son was born, because his language development was not straightforward. So the more interested I became in how children learned, the more drawn I was towards the learning and creativity process overall. And that eventually led me to become interested in how the human brain works and neuroplasticity, which is our ability to learn and to change our brains.
Okay, so what are the uses of neuroplasticity?
Well, neuroplasticity is just the technical way of saying your brain's ability to learn and change and adapt. So every time you develop a habit or a skill, or every time you decide to do something and make a plan to do it, you're using your neuroplasticity, because that is effectively creating new pathways in your brain. Now, the thing about neuroplasticity is that it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It can be either. So you can just as easily form a bad habit as a good habit, for instance. And that's one of the things, that people, I think, forget, that the more we repeat something, the stronger that connection, the stronger that learning becomes in our brain.
Okay, so like when the people repeat more, they will remember more. So is this just restricted to studies or in everyday life?
Oh, no, it's not just for study at all. For instance, we learn certain responses to events, to emotions. For instance, if we decide, or if we have repeated engagements with an individual that we aren't really enjoying, we might learn to dislike that person, and then we might start to anticipate that we're not going to enjoy ourselves when we see them. If we are learning to dance, for instance, we will learn the things by repetition, and eventually they become part of what it is that we know, what our brain can do without thinking about it. There are actually a couple of different stages in the learning process, and the first one is known as the unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. And then when we have picked up a little bit of what it is, when we've grasped what we have to learn, then we know what we don't know. And that's the level that's known as conscious incompetence. We're aware of what we don't know. Then we start to move on again, and we have conscious competence. We're aware of what we should do and we're able to do it. We've put the skills and the learning together. And then finally, when we become the habit, when it becomes ingrained in us, that's what we refer to as unconscious competence. We're no longer aware of it. That if you try and give somebody directions to your house, it's quite possible that you might actually forget to mention a little turn or something that they should do to get there, because you know it so well, and you forget that you actually know this piece of information.
Okay, so why should one opt for neurotransformation? Like, what are the benefits of it?
Yeah, so the benefits of using applied neuroscience, which is the base toolkit really for neurotransformational techniques, is that what we're actually doing is we're leaning into how the brain works, and we're developing an understanding of how it's working. Because most people, we've often been taught a very limited understanding of what it is that the brain is doing or why it's doing it. And one of the things that we need to remember is that your brain has got one single mission. And that mission is to keep you safe, to keep you alive at all costs. That's what it is trying to do. It's not there to, create wonderful things or to learn language or any of those things. It is only there to do things that will help you survive. Now, the thing about the human brain is that depending on where you grew up, depending on the kind of family you had, depending on the kind of genetics that you've got, there are a lot of different ways that influences come into that, and your brain tries to find its way through all of these unique circumstances that are yours and yours alone. So what happens then is that our cultures don't necessarily teach us a lot about how the brain is working, because in many ways we're still discovering it. Scientists are still working very hard to unravel the mysteries of our brain. And we are now getting a little bit more information about it. And using applied neuroscience actually draws on all of the research that's coming from that. So instead of just being told, oh, do this, it'll work, it'll help you to achieve the goals that you want, or some other form of motivation like that. With applied neuroscience, what we actually do is we go into, right, this is what's happening in your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere. This is what's happening with your prefrontal cortex. This is what's happening with the cocktail of chemicals that are going on in your brain. And we break it down, and we use tools that actually support the functions of the brain and understand the functions of the brain, so that we can actually develop new learning, new neural pathways that are in tune with what our brain is doing anyway.
Okay, so like as you mentioned that you are still discovering about how you all are still discovering about how the brain works, and it depends on people. So are people like, some people are very intelligent and some are like they take time to learn things. So are some people more naturally intelligent, or they become intelligent with time?
That's a really interesting question. Let me give you the example of my two children, for example. They're very, very different. And each and every person has probably got a different way of understanding and seeing the world. And we have things that come more naturally or more easily to us, and things that we might not find so easy. So for instance, my daughter is academically very capable. She learns things easily. She has no trouble when it comes to that side of her schooling. However, if you ask her to dance, she looks like it's not something that comes smoothly for her. My son, on the other hand, he has always struggled with writing things down, and even his spoken language came to him quite late. But he took up dancing, and he won trophies for it within months. So what we have to understand as well is that our system is not necessarily set up to understand and appreciate the different forms of intelligence or the different strengths that we each have. And some people are very good when you put them into an academic setting and you ask them to learn different things, or ask them to do maths instead of English or language, for instance. Whereas some are really, really good when it comes to making things with their hands or figuring out electronics. So it's not always a like for like process to assess someone's intelligence, I think. And we have to be very open to what it is that different people are good at. We can apply ourselves to different things, and we can encourage ourselves to learn certain things. But at the end of the day, we have to have the motivation to do it as well.
Yeah, that's right. I completely agree. Like everybody is different, and everybody's way of learning is also completely different one. So as we were talking about neuroplasticity, so I would like to know, are there any limitations of neuroplasticity?
Are there any limitations of neuroplasticity? Wow, that is such an enormous question. I don't think anybody has quite answered that yet, because we've got, I think it's something like 86 billion neurons in our brain. So Whether or not we will ever be able to know what the limits are, that is, wow. I wasn't quite prepared for as big a question as that. But what I will say on the limits of neuroplasticity, again, this is why we look at applied neuroscience. We can try and make changes till the cows come home. We can try and force ourselves to do things without necessarily understanding the underlying mechanisms that are in the brain. And it doesn't always work, because it's almost like putting a plaster over a cut, or plastering over the crack in the wall. Unless we actually understand the structure that's below it, we're not really going to make lasting change. And I hear people talking about this time and time again, like health coaches and gym instructors and so on. So people start and they've got great enthusiasm for something, and they're really going to the gym 5 days a week, and they're making great progress, and they're getting fit and all the rest. And then 6 months or a year down the line, they lose their motivation. They stop again. They fall off the wagon. And one of the reasons for this is that they are almost exclusively trying to use willpower to keep themselves going, without necessarily tapping into some of the other aspects of the brain, which would really support that change and really help to make it stick.
Okay, so like as you mentioned, like many people, they will go to the gym for 6 months and they will have the motivation. They will feel like they will do it continuously, but they don't. So like, why does it happen? Like, how to keep up that motivation, how to keep up that flow, that you should not leave anything and you should go happily. Like usually, apart from gym, there are many other things which people do when they are excited to do, but later they leave it. Like for example, when a person is like they want to do something specific, they will search for it and then they will do. But after a few months, they will lose that motivation. So like, how to maintain that motivation?
Yeah. And again, this is one of those things where it is really very individual for each person, and it is what actually gives them what is it that they really want. And this is something that a lot of people aren't always that good at understanding themselves, because we're so tied up in what other people expect of us, what we should do, because we think that other people want us to do it. Or we don't want to step out of line, or we don't want people to think that we don't care about them. There's so many things that go on emotionally for us that block us doing the things that we actually want to do. And another thing, it's not just about other people, but also we might have a set of fears that are about something. And if we're afraid of failing, for instance, or maybe even afraid of succeeding, again, unless we dig down, unless we kind of do the architecture or the archaeology dig inside our own brains and our own thinking, then it's very hard to realize what it is that will keep us going, what it is that is sustainable in terms of making those changes and seeing them through. And I'll give you an example. Actually, there was one time I had a client come to me, and he was a very senior level executive in his business, which was like a multinational business. So he had done very well. He had a very good career, and he had decided that he wanted to start a new business. And he had a business partner. He had a business plan. He'd done a lot of work in advance of coming to see me. And one of the things that I didn't get a great sense of excitement from him about this. He was absolutely sure that this was what he wanted to do. But when we started looking at why he wanted to do it, he didn't have so many strong answers. And he also didn't have, it didn't feel like there was a lot of energy behind it. So we talked again about, what was happening in that space and what kind of other startups were like and so on. And said, okay, well, so how much motivation, how much energy do you think that you need to succeed in this? And he said, oh, you definitely need to be 10 out of 10 for this. I said, well, okay, so in this moment, how much energy or enthusiasm do you think you have? And he said, about 5 out of 10. And the thing is that he knew himself at that point that he was doing something because he thought he should do it. He thought that this was his last opportunity to do it. It wasn't necessarily the right thing for him. And part of him, we are all as they say, the experts in ourselves. We do know at some level, but quite often we try to suppress it. And this is where it all goes wrong. We try to do the things that we think we should do instead of the things that are actually the right things for us to do.
Okay, so as you mentioned about the energy, like he did not have that enough energy, like he was not having much energy to do the new business, but he wanted to do his business for some reason. So like, does the word success even depends on the energies?
I think it does at a certain level, because we need to be ready to be brave. We need to be ready to engage with people. We need to have a level of sort of trust and curiosity and be ready to be innovative. We need to be forward thinking. We need to be able. I don't know if you've heard the phrase, some people play to win and some people play not to lose. And there's a little bit of that about it as well. If we're willing to be brave and to go out and do our thing, rather than to do something so that we don't lose face or we don't, experience a shortage of something. Those are two very different ways of approaching any project, really. And that sort of energy is not just about our own internal energy, but it's also about the way we meet other people, the way we work with other people. So our actions, reactions, and interactions are all affected by that energy that we have.
Okay, so like the energy which we have, it relies on it. So coming back to neuroplasticity once again, I would like to know, like, how does neuroplasticity activates, and is there any age in which neuroplasticity stops?
Okay, also great questions. So it used to be believed that, our brains were pretty much done. They were cooked by the time we were about 18 or 20, but we know now that that's not true, and that neuroplasticity is active for people right through life. However, it's a case of use it or lose it. So the more you keep your brain active, the more you learn, the more you support your brain function, the better your neuroplasticity is going to be, the more adaptable you're going to be, the more resilient you're going to be. Now, what supports that? So we have a number of factors that actually go into having a happy, healthy brain, basically. And some of them are really simple. This is common sense stuff. Good nutrition and hydration, good sleep, good social connections, having plenty of fun, being playful, moving, exercise, and also rest, which is not the same as sleep. Rest and downtime, and taking time off and letting your brain feel like there's not much expected of it today. And that is often actually the time when you have your best ideas, by the way. But all of those things go together to make up the supports that we need for extending our neuroplasticity.
Okay, so like as you told, you get the ideas when you are in, resting. So when we get ideas, like some people, they won't be able to implement it. So like, aren't ideas easy to get rather than implementing them? What do you think about it?
Yeah, for some people, they seem to have an awful lot of ideas and not so much implementation. And actually, what we're starting to talk about here is the difference in the functions of the hemispheres of the brain, the left and right hemisphere. And one of the things that is the two hemispheres have very different ways of seeing the world. So the right hemisphere has like a very big picture, and it can have great visions and so on for how things should be done. And then the left hemisphere of the brain is much more detail oriented and about planning and getting stuff in order and doing it and working out the nitty gritty. So if we are in a sort of frame of mind where we are leaning towards one or the other, if we've been rewarded, for instance, for only ever using the nitty gritty side of our thinking, or if we've been rewarded, whether internally or externally, for having big ideas, then we are maybe not as practiced as in using the other side of our thinking. And this is one of the things that we have to be able to do, is to integrate those two functions, those two ways of being in the brain. And that again is one of the reasons that I like the applied neuroscience so much, is that it understands that these two things need to be drawn together and how to do that. So yeah, when you have people who have great ideas and not so much action, it's quite often because they are not drawing on the strengths of the left hemisphere in order to make those plans happen and to make them succeed.
Okay. Okay, like going in deep into the brain is another thing. So like because of their left hemisphere, they are unable to implement it. So if it's more active, then they will be more active in like making their ideas also implementing in real life.
Yeah.
So
So I
so
mean, we all use both hemispheres all of the time. So there are some myths about, people being left-brained or right-brained. That doesn't happen. That never happens. But we can have tendencies where we lean into one way of thinking or the other. And it's really about making sure that both of them are active when we need them, being able to switch between them so that we get the impact of our whole brain and all of our intelligence, rather than just one factor of it.
okay, so like as you are a neurotransformation person, so like like is both the parts are working or not? What about the normal person? How do they know? Like are, for example, how do I know like my both parts are working or not, like left and right? Yeah. So I would like to know
Okay.
about it. Yeah.
So we'll give it. I'll give you just a very quick overview of how you can think about this. So if you think about the right hemisphere of the brain as being that big picture aspect of things, where there's a lot of connections being made, and it's able to have a good overview of things. It's like being able to see the whole forest. All right. So you think of your right hemisphere, and it can look at everything all at once. And then when you look if you look at something through the functions of the left hemisphere, it's much more like you're really, really zooming in and you're looking at one single pine cone, just one. And you're seeing all the detail in that and everything about it, but you're not necessarily looking at the bigger picture at all. So those are the two differences. If you are going into kind of the mode of the checklists and the details and the analysis and all of that, that's much more in tune with your left hemisphere thinking, and your right hemisphere thinking then will be far more about connections maybe with other people and the bigger picture and empathy and so on as well.
Okay, too much science now. Okay, so now let's move towards some imaginary questions. Let's imagine and inspire. So, Dedra, if you win a lottery ticket, for example, infinite amount of money, how will you spend that money?
Everybody will answer this quite differently, but for me, the mission is clear. It is all about improving our understanding so that we can be better at everything that we touch. There would be a lot of education programs involved in this, and a lot of rolling out of training. So, for instance, I've got a colleague who is currently in Kurdistan, and one of the things that she's doing, and I would absolutely support ventures like this, she is working with people who have survived trauma and conflict, and she is using neuroscience informed yoga to help them to work through their situations and their experiences. So, there are people on the ground who are doing unbelievably good work. And that is the sort of stuff that I would absolutely 100% like to support, as well as people who are using low-tech solutions to find answers to our environment problems. And, again, so many different projects come to mind that would be very, very worthy of support there.
Okay, so these are great ideas and all the best for it. And even I would like to support such people who are doing great things for the humanity. So, what about if you get a chance for time machine? Would you prefer to go in your past or your future?
I am going to go for future. And I think that, the past is pretty much okay. It is where it is. I'm here now and I'm reasonably happy with where I am. So there's not much to change there. But in terms of the future, I can always either find an indicator whether I should keep going the way I'm going or whether I should change direction.
Okay, so if you get a chance to live anywhere, like for example, any country for one whole year, so what country would you like to choose?
Slovenia.
Okay.
And yeah, it's beautiful. I've been there many, many times, and it always makes my heart sing to be in Slovenia.
Okay, that's great to know. So like, how do you see the world in next 50 years? Like, what changes do you think will be made in this world in the next 50 years?
Mm. We are at a precipice, aren't we? And this is one of the things that we have to, and again, this is part of the reason why I'm so enthusiastic and committed to applied neuroscience is, we do have to shift our level of thinking and our level of awareness from being fear-based and frustration-based to being braver and more innovative and more engaged and more empathetic. Because I feel that until we really start to empathize with our planet and the rest of the species that are sharing it with us, then we are not actually going to stand a chance of helping anyone to survive this. So yeah, that is, it can go either way. It still can go either way. And I hope that it goes the way that will see us all cohabiting more effectively and empathetically.
So, does anybody inspire you in life?
Oh, so many people inspire me.
Yeah.
So I absolutely 100% am inspired by people like that colleague that I mentioned, Brenda Hershey, who is, as I said, working at the very cold face of the worst things that have happened on the planet. I am inspired by the people who changed their lives to be more sustainable, to make a difference to our planet's resources. I am inspired by people who volunteer and give up their time to help others.
Yeah.
I'm inspired by researchers who spend their time trying to unravel the mysteries of our brain and many other things at the same time. I'm inspired by those who are looking for solutions to our energy crisis. I mean, everybody who is doing their best to
Yeah.
contribute is an inspiration.
That's right. I completely agree. Basically, everyone is an inspiration. If we see in the journal, like to conclude the inspiration, everyone inspires you in some or the other way. Like everybody is different. Some people will do something good which will inspire us in a way, and similarly, the other person, if he or she does something, it will also inspire. So everybody is a unique person, and everybody does inspires us in some or the other way. So, Deirdre, what are your future plans? Like, where do you see yourself in the coming years?
So I'm going to be continuing and driving forward the work with the NeuroDevelopment Institute, and my colleagues and I are already planning our Brain Awareness Week for 2023, which will be a series of events and so on that will help people understand a little bit more about how they can use brain science to improve and enhance their lives. I will continue my work with my clients and helping them to understand on a one-to-one basis what applied neuroscience means for them. No doubt I will write a couple of books or something like that. And also I'll be continuing with the podcast, the Ambition Incubator, and I really enjoy meeting people through that as well. It's always really good to hear what people are trying to do in the world.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, knowing about others is like it gives you inspiration, it gives you some sort of motivation, and it makes you more like you feel like you are doing something and you learned something or
Yes.
the other, especially when you meet somebody virtually. It's like a completely different experience as compared to the one which we do in person, which is like daily based. Okay,
Yeah.
so I would like to know, like, what advice would you like to give to those who are watching you right now?
Don't wait to find out more about what is going on in your brain. Don't imagine that you can't change the things about you that are not working for you, because you absolutely can. If you need support, get support for it. Don't be afraid to change. If you can see a better way of being, then go for it and be that better version of you, because you've only got one life and you've only got one lifetime to make a difference.
Yeah, that's right. There's only one life, so do what makes you happy and never give up if you want to do something. It was great talking with you, Dedra. I really enjoyed our today's conversation. And here is a small gesture from me to you.
Liva, thank you so much. This has been incredibly fun. You've asked some great questions as well, and it's been fantastic to connect with you. Thank you so much.
Likewise. So, would you like to say something then?
No, that's it. But if anybody is curious about applied neuroscience, then please do come and visit us at the Neurodevelopment Institute. And the website for that is NeuroDevelopmentInstitute.com.
Okay, thank you again, once again, for being part of Inspiration Talks, and thank you all for watching this episode. See you, and I'll see you in another episode with another guest.
Liva, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you talking today.
Wait, I was giving you an introduction. I was about to say about.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were pausing for me to, and I'll just keep quiet. Okay.
And did I say how are you?